Hi, everyone. You're watching Act.tv. I'm Julianna Forlano. Chivona Newsome, Bronx native and co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York, is here to discuss the significance of ex-police officer Derek Chauvin's being found guilty of murder in the killing of George Floyd. Chivona, thanks for joining me today.
Good morning, Julianna. It's always a pleasure to chat.
How did you spend your day yesterday?
Yesterday was a whirlwind. First up is legislation. So we have about 16 candidates running for New York City Council. And that's a huge legislative thing. Things that happen in City Council happen around the nation. So this is big for us, as we saw qualified immunity ending there. So we did a presser, released a blue wall law, which pretty much states that officers who falsify documents will be prosecuted in jail. The same way if I lied on any kind of government form, I could be prosecuted. Now that we want that to happen for anyone, whether you are a civilian or employed by the city or state. So with that being said, I got to see a lot of the same journalists all day because everyone waited with the anticipation. So we had this amazing press conference, went well. We decided to relax, the calm before the storm, because we didn't know, honestly, to be transparent, which way it was going to go. It was pins and needles. Every time my phone rang, I thought it was like someone calling with the verdict. So we sat out by the water, could see the Statue of Liberty, and then they're like, the journalists started calling. People started calling. They're like, it's an hour and a half away. So we went down to Union Square. We gathered some people, and I kid you not, this is a super Christian moment. I wanted to pray before I heard the verdict because I didn't know which way this war would take us, because we're in a war for Black liberation. So the journalist started to read out the verdict, the counts, while I was praying. Can you imagine, like, as someone who prays for liberty and feels they're doing the work of God, that I heard the news while me and the team were in prayer. So we went from Union Square, for people in New York, these are landmarks, to Barclays Center. We held another kind of rally, and then me and the team just wind down. And yeah, it's been up an early morning. But yesterday was an absolute perfect day. If you were in New York City, there was not a cloud in the sky. Everything I needed worked. I showed up every place on time. I'll always remember that 420, not only a celebration of marijuana, but 420 was a very special day for me.
Chivona, do you there's two different kinds of talk in terms of this is the start of police not being able to act with impunity when it comes to people of color. And then there's the other conversation of like, it's just one thing and we have to keep pushing. Your thoughts in that area in terms of activism?
With everything we do, whether it's protesting or strategic activism, why can't it be both? Yes, this sets a huge precedent in America. Yes, officers know that government-sanctioned killings have stopped. You will be penalized and tried the same way as a civilian. So hiding behind the shield and the blue wall, as they call it, in that culture, and feeling protected and untouchable, that stopped. I know it was a rude awakening for a lot of law enforcement on every single level, from local to federal. Now, the latter part of that is absolutely what I said yesterday. I was rejoicing. I said, tonight we dance, and then tomorrow morning I have to wake up and do the work. We all have to wake up and do the work. But everyone in America, feel happy. Pat yourselves on the back. This is the first time in our history that we've gotten all full counts. Okay, I'm going to rest on that until we get to sentencing. Hopefully sentencing goes well, but we've never seen this in our history. The most that would happen to a murderer like former Officer Chauvin would be he would lose his job. So we need to celebrate a victory, but then what it should do is inspire you. I don't know what type of person you are, but for me, when I get a win, it's like, what next is to be accomplished? What more can I do? Wait, this impossible thing just happened. So what's the next impossible task? And if you look at it like that, you'll allow yourself an emotional balance. It happens in our culture, and especially in activism and what I do. We carry the weight of the world around so much that you lose joy. That's why we preach so much about self-care. Americans who support humanity, Americans who may have blacked out their AV screens on social media or shared just one George Floyd post, you did this. Thank you. If it was not for the unrest, his family would not have justice. You have changed the world. Everyone who played their small part, Julianna, from you keeping it, as we say in the Bronx, 100 with everyone and speaking truth to power. This is the people's victory. I think yesterday showed that we are a government for and by the people. It was a nonpartisan thing. Even the pro-police people, the abolitionists, which I am an abolitionist, I believe we need to reimagine police. I think it was pretty cut and dry, and we saw that from the time people spent on the juror stand.
It's very interesting, having just had a conversation about just a couple of issues really come to light here. The first is police turned on police in the silent blue line. Thank you, Minnesota is not necessarily silent. Police were turning on police. What are your thoughts about that development?
And I think it's the way it should be. Because this culture, and for your people who know, when we talk about this blue wall, it's about protecting each other at all costs. Their no snitch policy is tougher than any cartel, La Cosa Nostra, or gang in history. They do not snitch. They do not rat. They are harder than criminals. So now they know, wait, if I lie on a report, because people did lie on those police reports with Chauvin, that's why the blue wall law is so important. They realized that they were touchable. I think it was very sobering to officers who walked around knowing that they could brutalize Black and brown people with no repercussion. So I think that now they'll think before they act. Maybe they'll approach until we abolish them, they'll approach their interactions with Black people very differently. I think they'll realize now that they're servants and they can be punished. Like me or you, you can be fired. I could be fired. These things can happen to any one of us.
Yeah, this is... do you think, Derek Chauvin was not necessarily just a cop. He also seemed to be a white supremacist, right? Am I wrong about that?
Well, since you want to go there, Juliana, we have to get into it how we usually do. Let's talk about the history of policing. Derek Chauvin was the model of policing. Policing in America came out of the trauma of colonization and out of racism. You talk about the slave patrols, how white men were enlisted to become police officers and law enforcement to capture, rape, and maim Black people. Now, the structure of America is very different. So people, when I say abolition, they're like, what are you talking about? A world with no police. The American system came about in the 1800s. It was modeled after Great Britain, our former parent company, our colonizer. But what they didn't want, because they feared going back into colonization, was having a centralized police force like other nations. So we decentralized and we gave local governments way too much power. So there's no code and ethics. But I don't believe that. I'm not one of those people. I'm not a real estate investor. It's interesting. I'm not there. But would you invest in a condemned building? Would you spend all your time, money, and efforts trying to repair something beyond repair? And I think that's where we are with law enforcement in America. The days of reform are done. Of course, we'll keep fighting and implementing change until we completely abolish. And abolish still means law and order. We just have to tackle a way around mental illness. We have to end the racial disparities and mass incarceration. And I think George Floyd, I have to remain hopeful. I think he's showing us that we can do this. We can have a new America that's equitable for all.
I think it's really interesting, the part that was played by the young teenage girl who filmed.
Right on, at 17.
Right.
Can you imagine
without all this stuff that people are doing to have it out there that this is important and that you should film the police when they're being, aggressive or even non-aggressive to keep them from being aggressive. All of the activism that came up to make this girl just be like, you know what? I'm just gonna, I think,
see, that's the thing about our culture. Meaning how people hate social media. They hate this new era we live in. It has now, for all of those videos you see that were gross and grotesque that we secretly watch, the fight videos and stuff, where people were accustomed to picking up their cell phones and recording, guess what? That's the culture she was raised into, and it worked for the greater good. Just like with social media, it can be bad or it can be amazing. So yeah, I'm happy she had her camera phone. And I'm happy she had the courage to do it. As a full-grown adult, I couldn't imagine my composure in the situation, to remain calm and to remain there, because let's be real, that was at least 10 minutes. George Floyd, that we learned during the trial, was dead for 3 minutes and 28 seconds while that officer placed his knee on his neck. What I think she needs is, what I really suggest, slightly off topic, I really hope that everyone involved, and I got that from watching the trial, I hope anyone who's listening, I hope you seek mental help, because right now, that was a lot of trauma. Mm-hmm. And you've seen it wearing on those people's faces. So I hope as Americans, or wherever everyone's viewing, because I know you're international, Lift these people up in prayer because they are the heroes. The truth tellers are our heroes.
Well, having worked as a therapist with people who suffer from trauma, the thing that usually helps people to overcome their trauma is to realize that what they went through is for something, can be used for good. And so I'm hoping that they're watching this and they get this, but I'm hoping that
We'll pump it out on all
they're
platforms.
already feeling that their trauma is for something. They're not just traumatized and then there's no justice. Their trauma was for not only justice for George Floyd's family, but I mean, this is like a huge deal.
It's an American revolution.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. George Floyd was an absolute martyr. He sparked the largest civil rights movement of all time. It's the first time we've had officers penalized. Look how swift justice was. Remember waiting weeks and months and years for some sort of closure to Eric Gardner? They sparked a revolution.
And I think the thing about the young girl was that she's so young, she wasn't afraid that the cop was going to maybe come and beat the crap out of her. I mean, adults would be like, I'm just going to back it off because
Black woman who's been beaten by the cops and continues to jump in it's black girl magic to anyone who knows what it is. I just had to throw that out there. She's just magical.
It was wonderful. Here's a question. Because Derek Chauvin was not just necessarily a police officer, but he was a white supremacist, what role does it play that we don't currently right now have a white supremacist as the president of the United States, as far as we know? Number one, probably not.
I think it changes a lot of things, as we saw with let's start with the Asians. Let's talk about where that hate came from. It came from our leader, from our president. Donald Trump supported white supremacy from the time we were down in Charlottesville, Black Lives Matter, Greater New York, when he said that the white supremacists who were attacking us, he said they were very fine people. He's always been pro-police. And right now it's sad that, well, no, it's not sad. It's his history. Being pro-police right now is to be a white supremacist. To be an officer is to enforce white supremacy. So everything about Derek Chauvin is everything that I've been screaming in my life's work. I'm happy the world doesn't think they still think I'm a crazy radical. But it's everything I've ever said.
Chivona, what about our people in the community? White supremacists don't usually take their licks and go home. You know what I mean? This is the law for that group. Yesterday? Are we concerned about, reprisal in one form or another?
On social media was circulating, and we get a fair share, my brother and I, amount of death threats. Yesterday, after the first press conference we did, I immediately strapped on my bulletproof vest. So when I heard Derek Chauvin's case, I had on a huge bulletproof vest that prepared for every kind of caliber weapon you could hit me with. My security, our security's out there. Our team is tactical training. The shirt I'm wearing is our Black Opportunities brand, where we do tactical training. Since Donald Trump, that white supremacist, unleashed all of his base onto us. So it's real, but every day I live with the threat of white supremacists. The things I say bring a lot of enemies. At home and abroad, and it's just I can't think about it too much because it'll stop me. It's like, so I have to pretend that putting on a sweaty 35-pound bulletproof vest is normal, but it's a part of my work and what I do. I do think there will be an uprising, as we've seen from reports from government agencies that white supremacists are the biggest threat to American safety. So we just have to exercise safety and precaution.
What direction should activists take, in your opinion? You said you were working on, dismantling some policies that allow the police to act with impunity. Where do we go now?
I think it starts with the community. I know that America is making a change. We're making a shift. You can kind of sense that reckoning in the air. But in the interim, and what I referenced earlier was Black Opportunities, which we are in the Bronx. We're expanding to Houston, Texas, and Georgia. We've purchased the indoor farm for Texas after the deep freeze. We have fed over 12,000 people in the last year. For me, the true activism starts in your community. If your neighbor next door can't get out to get her groceries and medicine, start there. Make it home better. Speak truth to power. And I don't I hate the term of activist, tell you sometimes, because that label is just so broad, but it gives people such a narrow view. Everyone thinks that we spend most of our time protesting, and it's so much more than that. I like to call everyone activists. Juliana, I think of you as an activist because you speak truth on your platform. The people who stay at home and who share things, who share on their social media, the people who ride their bicycles to keep organizers safe, keep doing what you do because the pressure won't let up. We seen after the riots in America, which riots are the cries of the unheard, when we seen that vandalism, because most of it was violence by the part of the police, but it was property damage on the side of activists, keep going. Because if you weren't in the street, if America wasn't smothering and burning, none of this would happen. Chauvin was literally arrested within days of the world seeing the tape. I was on the ground at George Floyd Square when they announced his arrest. So don't let up. This is the American way, from the Boston Tea Party to every single thing that we've ever done. Keep fighting. Don't shut up. Be loud. Make noise. The squeaky hinge gets the oil. So that's my advice for activists. You should be fired up. Yesterday you celebrated. I hope maybe tomorrow I could get some sleep. It's not quite looking like it, but keep going.
Well, I love how joyful you are. I love how joyful you are. Right before this interview, we talked about how important it is to embrace the wins and not just worry about the whole thing.
Right, you have to. And it's like America's in our cancel culture, everything is really so black and white. You can't, who's to say you can't celebrate the victory and still know that more change is going to come? We know this wasn't the ending of a war. Like, no one's deceived that all racism and poverty has been eradicated. But you know what? You worked hard. We achieved the goal we set out to achieve. Celebrate and be inspired to do more. So yes, today is as much harsh truths as I like to give today, or maybe for the rest of the week, I might write it. I encourage all people.
There's positive vibes like going out all across the land.
Like, I can't stop smiling, and I'm trying to talk about serious stuff. Be happy, be joyful. You need the balance, and it's the courage and the strength it gives you to go on. So celebrate that risk. Throw your hand in the air. Give a shout out to George Floyd. Throw up some old protest photos. Whatever you did, whatever contribution, even if you just told people around the water cooler, smile today. That's what I want everybody to do.
Chivona Newsome, Bronx native and co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Greater New York. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Anytime, Juliana. I love you.
Love you too. You're watching Act TV. Keep watching.